Okay, I think we may get started and people can join in while I'm doing the boring talking part, and then they'll be here by the time we get to Amy. So, hi everyone, my name is Louisa Owen Sandstrom. In 2019, I started Patternmaking in Public Places, which is a project seeking to democratize access to pattern making skills by removing barriers of geography, economics, age, language intimidation, and more. Last year, we did free public pattern making demonstrations in public parks in all 5 boroughs of New York City. And this year, we are excited to welcome in a series of amazing guest pattern makers. So today is our first event of the 2020 season, and I'm excited to introduce you to Amy Sperber, who will be leading a demonstration called Simple Zero Waste Top.
Hi.
Amy?
Hi.
Hey, Amy. So I'm going to quickly read a bio so that you know just how awesome she is. Amy Sperber is an assistant professor at the Fashion Institute of Technology in New York. She's a multidisciplinary fashion designer, consultant, and educator. Amy graduated from FIT in 1997 with her BFA, and again in 2019 with her MFA. Her graduate work in the first cohort of FIT's Master's Fashion Design program focused on common human forms utilizing body scanning and custom avatar development, partnered with dynamic patterns that are designed to be highly adaptable and easy to sew in an on-demand environment. She's currently exploring upcycling and alternative manufacturing systems while also pursuing 3D printing technology as a tool for fashion customization. Very cool. So
put me in Star Trek.
Amazing. Okay, so quickly, a couple things. This event is absolutely 100% free because we want to make these empowering skills as accessible as possible. However, if you're watching now or in the future and feel moved to make a donation in recognition of Amy's work, we won't say no. Amy is requesting, though, that any such donations be made to the Fashion and Race database, for which I will post details shortly. In fact, I already did in the Zoom and YouTube chats if you want to take a look there. But no pressure, it's free. We're so glad you're here. We're recording this as a live webinar, but we'll make the video available forever afterward. You'll be able to find it on patternmakinginpublicplaces.com and on YouTube. And if you're watching this live, please feel free to submit questions or comments in Zoom, and I'll pass them to Amy. I will also monitor the YouTube live stream chat, so feel free to submit there as well. Amy, you're amazing. Welcome, and I'll pass things over to you.
Thank you. So just to have a quick little history, pattern making, zero waste pattern making is not new at all. Actually, it's very, very old, and it has long roots that attach actually to the textiles themselves. The best example I can give is when you think about a kimono, those were designed based on the width of the goods that the weavers made. So this is not a new idea. And then there's actually no wrong way to do this. There's no, I'm going to show you some methods, but the best thing right now is that you're conscious, right? And that you're making an effort not to waste things. So if in your development or designs of a t-shirt, you have a little scrap left over, just save it, make it stuffing for a dog bed, or use it later, or patchwork it into a whole nother yardage of fabric that then you could cut another t-shirt out of. So there is no wrong way. We're just being conscious. So I'm gonna switch my camera. I'm out in the lovely wilds of New Jersey, as you can see behind me. But in front of me now these are just some things to consider. So this is the piece of goods that I used for this project. And it happened to be 36 inches wide by 60 inches long. You could literally use any fabric that you have. It's just about then dictating, well, will it work on the body? So for me, I needed to know my head width, which is 22.5, my chest at the widest, which is 40, and my waist at the hips, the widest is 39. I know that this 36 will fit that 39 because actually it's ×2, right? Because we're gonna have 2 layers of fabric. So the measurements are not as important in the design. They're just to check that your fabric will actually fit the body. I like a 24-inch long shirt length, so that's why I include it. You could always go shorter, you could go longer. It is literally a design as you draft kind of approach. So let's start with what I'm gonna do. So this is my fabric in 1/8 scale size. So 1/8 scale is all of the numbers of the fabric divided by 8. So you'll have a proportional visual as you figure out how you want to cut this up. I was taught by Holly McQuillan and Timo when learning zero waste, the first thing to do is to like crush your fears down. Don't be afraid. Make the pattern paper really broken, because then it won't rip if it's, I do have a little one there. It won't rip as badly if you're modeling with it, if it's been kind of scrunched up. So I scrunched it up and then lay it back out. Okay, so first thing, I know that I liked that 24-inch long length. And in my 1/8 inch scale version, I know I'm gonna come down 3 inches, right? I have my little ruler just so I can see it. There's that first 3. What this first 3 is doing is, that's actually now the shoulder line when we think about it. That's gonna be the half of the garment. I could just draw a little dashed line across. So that's my half. Now, if I take this paper and go from my top to the bottom, I now can see the full width of the shirt, or I can make it longer, right? Because I have this excess. For this first demo, I'm going to keep it symmetrical. So I'm just going to mark this is the end, right? So this portion of the fabric is going to get turned into sleeves. When I open back up, my end didn't really mark. This is going to be the back. This is going to be the front. And the way I establish that is by folding again. Okay. And then from here, I'm going to do a kind of the all-in-one arch that will give me a shoulder line and a neck opening. So you can decide how deep, how shallow you want. But I start at here, which is think of this as like your center front neck, and I come all the way down. So that's the arch for the front. But you could also make this the back. That's the beauty. There's no hard, fast rules. So this is our front piece. This is the back now. And then this excess is what we're going to use for our sleeve. So I can either fold that in half, cut it. And now I have fabric designated for the sleeves. Do you have any questions? Do you want me to keep going? We're good?
Looks like no questions yet.
Okay, good. You guys are getting it. So then what you would do is, it's not just thinking about zero waste is not just like drafting the pattern and then cutting out in the fabric. It is, you're thinking about how maybe you would construct it to what method you would use to sew it together. So if I'm putting my front to my back and then going over, you know, do you want to do a lapped seam here? Do you want to do a little, you know, decorative stitch to attach them? Holly in the book talks about, or actually maybe it was on her website, Make Use, putting a little bit of like paint on the edges so that you don't have to turn them or hem them. And then through there, you can join with decorative stitching. There's just a lot of opportunity. The measurement of the head, that was really important. That for me was 22. I think in the ACE, it's about 1 something. You want to mark that head opening somewhere on the 2 pieces so that you make sure you don't sew that, right? You want to keep that open and you're going to just sew down those sides. And I've made this other little schematic visually so you could see. This is it all flat, okay? So if you sew that front arch and tuck back that little, just a little piece here, take that front arch piece, and if you tuck it back, now you have a nice, it's like a bateau neckline across the front, the back, the sleeves, and then if it's folded and sewn down, this way here, this way here, you have this very easy little shirt. I use the whole, like I said, the whole width of the goods. So this is actually really, really big. I made a sample that I'll show you, but you could reduce this measurement in half, turn the fabric another way, make it narrower, make it longer. There really are a lot of possibilities. Once you work it out in paper, you would want to have a your plan transferred then back to the fabric. So you would want to transfer your arch, transfer your end cut, and then transfer your cut for the sleeve. So it's really these lines that are transferred. It's not like a pattern shape, maybe that's used in traditional pattern. It's the schematic of how you're going to cut up the goods. I did a quick little thing. Now, if we think, you know, as a creative, what possibilities could arise if you designed the fabric yourself. Let's say you designed this, right? You digitally printed or you screen printed or painted yardage, and you isolated where the pieces on the pattern were. You could then essentially make your little shirt very easily, and you've not only, you know, designed the garment, but you've designed the textile too. So this is the simplest way, but clearly from here, there's a lot of space that you can go in this zero waste methodology. Questions?
Still looks like there aren't any, but that is beautiful and so inspiring.
Thank you. I can do another one. Like I said, I've got lots of little paper scraps. There are some like fun things you can do once you've kind of established that you're understanding the methodology. You can, which is fun. So let's say I just start folding down. You can do these things where, you know, let's say you want to have a shirt tail hem on your t-shirt version. You have your front. We can have our back. We can have our two sleeves. But let's say you're like, oh, I really would like something not straight in the back. If you do a slight arch this way, cut it, and then reattach it, right? You're going to attach it and you're going to get a little bit, because you're attaching a straight line to a curve, you're going to get a little bit of a flounce, just the properties of what fabric does. You can then have, though, another variation of a t-shirt. It doesn't just have to be the straight across. Let's do my little tape sewing. And this is the same for the sleeves. You could cut these kind of shapes into the sleeves and flip them and reinsert them back in. But this then gives your back. So the back of your garment could have this little tail. Your front could be shorter. And then fold down your neck. There are two sleeves. So it's another way to think about it. And again, you would build your schematic for this. The lines that you would make sure you show are the fact that you are cutting a tail off. So again, you go back to your actual fabric and you would have this kind of big arch, short arch, and then two pieces that develop from a straight line.
That's amazing.
Yeah, I'll show you the sample. Let me switch my camera. So the sample that I made, I'm gonna stand up so you can see it. This is that 36 by 68 piece of fabric, and it's really big, but you can see that this is super voluminous. I double folded the sleeve piece to make kind of a binding. Super fun. And it has kind of kimono-y vibes. Once you kind of see it, you see that it's got that kind of big drapey kind of kimono feel. And I love the bringing the back to the front. So you could really plan a visual shift of color or print from that line.
Yeah, I love how you're able to see the difference because of those seams.
Yeah. So
I bet people would also be interested to hear about the fabric a little bit.
this is a funny fabric that my daughter and I filled water balloons with tie-dye and then threw it against the mordanted fabric on a wall. You know, when you're in some of those graduate school programs, you get real high concept. So you read my mind, fabric choices. It's true, right? So I find that this is really an interesting way for, I'll go back to the little schematic. It's a real interesting way for a designer to be involved in the textile development and the pattern development. You can literally be holistically connected to two. So you want to see other versions?
Yeah, that would be great. It's also making me think of, obviously there are ways to make this more and more complex in really exciting ways, and even in simple ways. As you said, it could just be longer and it could be a tunic or a dress or.
Yeah, just as you're just thinking about the fabric you have, like if 36 inches, so I've been folding down this way, right? Because I like wide, but if the 36, if this narrow fold, right, what you get from core or halving it this way works, that's totally, you can totally do that too, right? So if you were to determine that this was then going to be, let's cut it, this was going to be the body. You have a front and a back, and then this piece that you can do a lot with. One of the, let me think how to explain this the most simply. So you can, we're gonna get conceptual here, but you can do things where you slash in zero waste, right? I've made a slash. This can then act as an underarm. Let's see if I can remember how I've done this in the past. The slashes can connect back. I think actually I'm taking you down a route we might not want to go.
Oh, I think we want to go there.
You want to go there? Actually, I've done this. No, not this way. We're gonna tape that back together. That's the beauty of paper. Is that nope? We're not gonna. If I can't explain it to you clearly, I don't want to confuse you.
So would you recommend always, when you're planning a zero waste garment, always working with paper first?
Yeah, always, because you definitely don't want to do this. The thing you don't want to do is waste fabric, right? That's the whole point of being a conscious designer, is that you don't want to make waste, right? You don't want to, you want to be mindful. So thinking about the material, it's a very different way. Like I've taught this idea, I've taught it internationally. And one of the things the students always say is that it's slow. You can't just like jump into it and like trace that bodice shape and cut it out and put it on the dress form. It slows you down a lot, and you have to really think about what you're doing and what the possibilities are. Let's see. I have a dress that's really fun to do. If you do this, instead of taking the fabric from the bottom, if you take the fabric from the side, let's do 2 long side cuts. We'll do that same thing for the dress, that same arch. Front and our back of our dress. This can become the most delightful ruffle because you can just gather all of this in. That's the other thing. You don't have to keep straight to straight. You can cut larger pieces, right? And then attach them to smaller. So you can do a dress, actually I'll tape it, where you get these great ruffles. That's a fun one to do because then you can plan out, let's say you really were designing the textiles, you could plan the ruffle print to be totally different than the dress. You could plan it to be in a different colorway. So front ruffle, back ruffle, pleats, any of that, all of that is possible. You're just thinking about not wasting the textile.
Very cool. We have a question from Marjorie who asks, can you show and talk about the finishing of the neckline and the set-in neck?
Oh, yes. Okay, so that's the quick little, there's your tank dress. So the finishing of the neckline on this sample, and I'll take it off and show you what I did. I'll switch. You don't have to see this. I'm gonna actually put it in front of us here. What I did for this one is, so first I hemmed and did like a finished hem, right? So I made 2 little turned hems. This is the shoulder that's sewn. And then because I made the hems first, the neckline technically was finished, right? It each had a finished hem. But then I turned the front one back and did a little like, what do you call it? A little invisible tack from the front so that it would stay down. I mean, here, this is a chance to design. You could like put a big heavy top stitch on there so you had that arch showing from the front. There's like a lot of things you can do. You could bind all of this with contrast fabric or twill tape, or, especially if you're worried about losing size to the seam allowance, to the finishing, you definitely can, there's no rules, like I said. So you could come in with any kind of seam tape or finish. Lapped seams are really great if you didn't want to do, like the bound seams like I did. You could literally sew them lapped over on each other. But that was my way to resolve it. If this was, if you had a serge, you could literally just serge all the edges and, leave the serge if it was contrast. It really is a kind of design as you develop. You really want to think about, oh, how am I going to finish that? How am I going to sew this together? Put this dress. This is my sewing of this little.
Seems like it would also depend a lot on the fabric that you were choosing, and was it knit, or is it looser or denser? What are the edges like?
Yeah, do they really unravel? That's the other thing. If the edges of the fabric are super, they unravel. I find that Holly's idea with the paint is really genius because it stops the fabric from fraying, right? So it's almost like a designer fray check by having this little edge of paint. So there's definitely, don't be afraid. That's the other thing. There's no rules. She's gonna go, she and her buddy here. That could be a little fashion show. Other questions?
I don't see any currently, but please, everybody, do share as they occur to you. Yeah, it strikes me how much of a conversation this is between you and the fabric, really. The widths of it, the the properties of it,
Mm-hmm.
the measurements of your body.
Yeah, it's interesting for me to see how many bodies can be included in zero waste, because it's really easy to do it for little, right? But can we make beautiful things as we go up the spectrum of size? That's the challenge, because this is not about like traditional grading anymore. You're not thinking about small, medium, large. You're letting the textile. Is there enough textile to do the design I want to do? Do I have to piece stuff together? So, oh my God, the shark.
I love it.
Yeah.
You mentioned when we were first chatting about doing the demo today, I think you mentioned that really the future in your eyes is that the fabric mills themselves would have to create fabrics in more widths and
different widths that work better with, what did we say? We thought that the traditional cutting is 15% loss that just goes on the floor when you're making a garment. So imagine if the widths were better kind of developed, that there could be even less, 0, 2%, you know, so.
Yeah, even 2 is so much lower than, I think the industry standard is 15%.
Yeah.
And I'm sure in home sewing, it's even more because we don't cut out 10 of the same garment at once.
Yeah,
together.
exactly. Although you could save all of those scraps, that's the beauty. Let's say you had your scrap basket or from in your stash, and they all were odd sizes. You could piece them all together and then figure out from that shape how you could make other shapes, right? So it's not. It is old though, when you think about how people really used to make clothes and repair them and keep them. There's a lot of history of kind of. It's all valuable, every last piece, you know. Anything else? I can do another one. I have another little, I'll do another shirt version where, so this is like that idea of it painted. So you would have your pattern cut out, but you could do a version where instead of it slipping over your head, let's say we decide this is going to be the 2 little sleeve bands here. So these will become our sleeves. This is our back. This is our front. And then let's say I decide that I want to put in a button placket. I have that ability to, by then taking this piece and cutting that, and then you can either do, not unlike a kimono where it goes around the neck, and you know how a kimono comes down and the neck binding kind of stops a little bit early? Could be something like that, you know, where you come around and down. So you could then put your button pocket on there. All kinds of ways to think about this. This would be a little, the sewing on this would be a little bit, you know, because you're trying to fit, not really a circle, but I think when there's a will, there's a way. You figure out how to put it together. You could literally start to make things that are recognizable. None of this has to feel so foreign. There. You know, you could put a button on there. And that's just deciding that the end pieces is going to be cut narrower and then stitched together, and then you're cutting open at your center front. And that plan, if I drew that for you, it's essentially this same plan, right? But you've decided that you're going to slash here, and then you're going to slash those 2 together, and then this and this will get attached at the end. when you're thinking about the material, because you've made one long neck piece out of the bottom pieces of the fabric.
Awesome. So you mentioned that people have creative opportunities by designing their own textiles. Some people may be weavers, which is amazing.
Yes.
If you are not a weaver, are there suggestions that you have for people about how they could still design their own fabric?
Yeah, absolutely. You and I had talked a little bit. Oh no, sorry. Oops, sorry about that. There are digital printing services. So if you're comfortable on the computer, you definitely could do layouts using something like Spoonflower or Cadora. Cadora, is that the other one? Condora. One of those companies that'll you just upload your file, and then they'll, you pick the type of fabric and engineer your print onto it. So that's a really material saving technique, because you go right from paper directly to the fabric, and then you just cut and sew it. There's no transfer. Everything is all in one. So pretty cool.
Again, if people have any questions or comments, we're all ears. But meanwhile, we can keep demoing and chatting for sure. Totally. So I have a question for you.
Yeah.
How did you first learn to make patterns, and how would you recommend that others start learning?
So I went to school. I went to FIT for undergrad. But it's funny, when I left in 1997, I was the generation that was responsible for the globalization. Like we're in this big mess right now, thanks to my age bracket, and I'm on a mission to amends my bad. But so as a kind of commercial fashion designer, I wasn't the pattern maker, I was the designer, but I've always been obsessed with geometry and shape. And I would doodle a lot in Illustrator on how to develop patterns. And then for me, the transition into 3D, which when she described me earlier, I do a lot of stuff digitally. So taking some of these pattern ideas that were maybe not conventional into 3D for me has been a really freeing design opportunity, because talk about zero waste. Like I don't make anything. I make 3D models of things. And if I choose to make it, I then take the steps to print the pattern out. But I have hundreds of kind of wild hair ideas that are just digital files. They're not, I haven't used any materials. So for me, it's been a really safe place to kind of get very, very creative and make mistakes, and I'm not wasting. And because I'm not wasting, I'm really liberated to kind of play around. Because ironically, the patterns, if you're really passionate about pattern making and you go back into history, haven't changed that much. You go back 300 years and a blouse is still a sleeve, a bodice, there's some darts, a collar. There's not a tremendous shift in what the geometry actually is. And I think now we're in an era that we can really change what the geometry can be with manufacturing, with digitization, with kind of new approaches. So yeah, I know Holly, if you find her on Instagram, she's now weaving full garments. It's amazing. Like she's made a whole pair of pants off a loom that you just have to add a zipper, which is pretty fantastic. So
that's amazing. So do you think it's possible? So in the industry, there are people who are called designers and there are people who are called pattern makers, and they tend to be different people, maybe even in different countries.
Yep.
But you are sort of proposing a model in which sounds like it's the same person even.
Yeah, it's holistic. You are thinking about the textile, you're thinking about the geometry, and you're thinking about, the designer is often kind of a glorified stylist in a way, just detail focused, not really, big picture. So, but you would be all of those things. you know, and then with the ability to reach across the globe, which does have its benefits, you really can partner with unique artisans and, you know, talk their language. Oh, this is what I'd like you to help me figure out on the loom, or this is, you know, this fiber would be amazing if we tried it with this dye and then brought it into the pattern that I'm thinking about, because I know it'll respond in a certain way.
So you're showing today pattern making with little bits of paper, little tiny slips of paper. And you, meanwhile, in your own work, are using, in some ways, the complete opposite, which is like a very professional digital tool to model, but both of them are kind of ways of testing out without much waste. How do you envision the future of pattern making, I guess, in an ideal world? What would it look like?
I mean, my dream is that it is that in that digital space, but that we all understand that we can come out of it. I think a lot of people get trapped in the mindset that it has to stay on screen. It's either on screen or it's in reality. And my vision is this holistic idea that like what you see on screen can then come out into the real world, and then the information can cycle back in. You know, I love the idea of an on-demand environment where you only buy what you see, and what you see is exactly what fits you and works for you, and you're not, you know, you're not a number, you are unique, and so is the garment to you.
Totally. So we have a question from Kate, who asks, does Loom technology allow for different widths to be made on the same loom? Or would different widths of fabric require separate specific looms? I know so little about loom construction.
Yeah, it's the second part. I have yet to see, I mean, I guess you could make less warp, but you're still in the, you could go less, but you can't go bigger because of the way the machine is made. So you could weave narrower on a wider machine, but you can't go bigger. And a lot of the, you know, to make the return on the investment on the cost of these giant machines, they run the full width of the goods, you know, especially you'll look now that we've had this conversation, I've planted the seed, hopefully you're going to look around, you're like, oh my God, fabric comes in like only a few choices. It's like 25 inches wide, 36 inches wide, 60 inches wide if you're lucky. I like to look clearly because I love volume. I like to find 90-inch wide fabric. A lot of that is not stuff for apparel. It doesn't, you know, they usually don't make 90-inch wide goods for apparel. But for me, that's like a beautiful big piece of fabric that I can get into, mess around with. You know, I love to gather it in. I love volume. I don't know. I'm in the wrong era. I probably should have been in the Middle Ages or something with a tabard and a chemise.
You were also telling me, and I think everybody would love to hear about in your own work, how you take pre-existing, I don't know if they're thrifted garments, and if you can tell us about that.
Right. So with this idea of, again, acknowledging the fabric, right, in that zero waste mindset, I like to envision new patterns, right, inside what I call secondary market garments, right? So you go to the Goodwill, and I like to say, oh, what's in season at the Goodwill? You know, because they rotate it out. So if men's shirts, if there's a lot of men's shirts, I can go in and say, oh, I know I have a nice big back piece. What can I develop from the back piece? And then maybe if I take the front piece and again, take it apart and figure out what shape I have, I like to draft inside pre-existing shape. Clearly that goes from bigger to smaller unless you patch stuff together. But I'm always thinking about geometry and not just in like square, thinking about, oh, how do I fit it in? It looks like it's a kind of a trapezoid. Grain, you know, you and I were discussing yesterday, grain sometimes you might want to like play a little to the left or the right of it. You know, if you go in too far, some of the angles, garments do funny things, but how much you're willing to kind of fuss with the grain a little. you can get some really interesting results.
So I'm guessing that some of the people watching know a whole lot about sewing and maybe a bit about pattern making, maybe a lot. For people who are newer to it, can you explain a little bit about what the grain is and how that relates to a garment?
Sure. Yeah, here, I'm actually gonna, I'll do a drawing. I love a visual. Okay, so, ooh, sorry. Okay, so grain, when we think about how fabric is made, these are the warps, right? So they warp the machine, and then these are the wefts that come in across. And we like to call straight grain is the grain that runs up and down, right? And that usually gives you expected behavior in textile. You know what you're going to get and how the fabric is going to hang. When we start to like clockwise off of it, this grain, she's like the most exciting for a lot of us. This is bias. It's a 45-degree angle. I'm sorry, 90 degrees, right? 90-degree angle. And she's the grain that literally will stretch on a woven fabric. So see if I can find the bias on here. So like this is straight grain. We're up and down, right? If I grab it at that 45 degrees, we get this beautiful movement, which is just the warp and weft, because even in this tiny, tiny weave, they have room to move. So a lot of times you can get a little dangerous if you start to like, if you're cutting over here, you're okay if you're over here, but that's the thing, to be conscious of the grain. So when you're thinking about, if I bought a men's button down shirt and I'm cutting something out of like the back piece that looks like this, if I cut off the sleeves and I just have the back, that's straight grain. But if I want to put in a bodice that I need a big space here, I might be getting into some funny movement of drape because it's at that slight angle. So yeah, that's something to think about. But you can get away with a lot of stuff, if you're not, doing the big moves gets a little sketchy, but little moves, if it's just a tiny little move, a little wiggle, you can do a lot of interesting things inside of pre-existing geometry. So
That's fascinating. Thank you for that. So we also have a question from Marjorie. Can you share with us pictures of other things you've designed and made? And she knows the answer might be no.
Oh, of course. Do you want me to try to go through my computer now, or do you want me to just give it to you later, Louisa?
Whichever works better for you. We can definitely send links or images.
Let's see, are we talking the zero waste stuff? Because here's the thing, you guys, I don't stop. I love to tinker. I love to make stuff. So not everything I do is zero waste. I do love a dynamic pattern. Actually, I will share that. Let me find it. I love the idea of like a single seam that can make an entire garment. It's very, let's see, I'm gonna pull up a picture. Okay. So can I share my screen? No, I'm disabled. Can I put it in the chat? Can I throw a picture in a chat? Let's try it.
Let's see. Okay, here, you can now share your screen, I believe.
Yeah, there we are. Okay, let's share this. So what this is, y'all see this? This is a jacket that is one piece. And I will draw the pattern for you and then show you. It is a one-piece jacket that looks like this. Okay, so look at the jacket, and then I'm gonna switch to, and this is a jacket pattern I'm giving away. So let's switch. So this is what the pattern looks like. It is one piece, right? And it's one seam. So you start at the back, and when you attach it to the front, it rolls the sleeve shut. So it's really easy to sew. It looks very upsetting when you look at it. It's like a butterfly, like it's not, it shouldn't be possible, but it is. So kind of zero waste, not really, because, you know, it's a big piece of fabric, but you're, okay. So this is thinking about pattern making in a whole new way. Your sides come to the front. Your front comes down to the, or your back comes down to the front. So it's safe to say that I really like to think about geometry in a different way. So then your sleeve seam would roll up and close. So essentially you're only sewing 2 lines and you get a whole garment. And this is, yeah, this is a piece that I love to give this pattern away because I like to make it out of old bed quilts. I have a couple of these where you just take a quilt and then you get a jacket. So that's that's what this is for me. When I was trained zero waste, this opened the floodwork to me thinking about dynamic pattern, you know, and thinking about what else could be if we unlearned some of those very traditional expected geometries for designing clothes. So
that is astounding. So the term dynamic patterning, I haven't heard that before. Is that your term? Is that
yeah, you know, it's like, ooh.
I love it. Okay, we have another question from Lindsay. Does designing zero waste patterns typically take you more time, attempts, iterations than a non-zero waste pattern?
Yes, absolutely. Because it's just, you do not want to cut that fabric until you are exactly sure you've come to what you want it to be. So it's not like, oh, I'll just go get more fabric. That fabric, I always like to say, like, it is, that's the prize. So you don't want to do anything to it until you know exactly what you want to do. So it's slower. It's more mindful, you know, which is not a bad thing. You want to see the quilt flattered again. You want to see it flat here. And this is me drawing it loose. And I will share the PDF file with Louisa to put on her pattern making website. But it's similar to this. It might have a little more wiggle, but it's this. And that. Yeah. So you're thinking, what can come to the front, the sides wrapping around?
Are there types of garments that are particularly difficult to do or impossible to do in a zero waste patterning way?
No, nothing is impossible. There is just an understanding. Like to do pants, like if you want to do a pair of like woven pants, you technically have to make 2 pairs because you're only literally cutting out, like the first cut is 2 left legs and the second cut is 2 right legs. So on some of them, it is an understanding that you can't just make 1, you can make 2, but anything is doable. If you look at the book, you'll see what people around the world have attempted, and much more complicated than this. This is just, you know, very basic geometry.
So you've made a few references to the book. I just want to make sure everybody knows about it. So the first thing that's entered in the chat for both Zoom and YouTube includes the book Zero Waste Fashion Design. And I'm gonna spotlight for a second to show you. So this is the book, and it is really worth calling the book. It's amazing, and there aren't really other books like it at this time. Amy, I'm sure you want to say more, but it's by Holly McQuillan and Timo Risanen, who are leaders in the zero waste patterning.
Amazing. They're like the best humans on the planet. So
you've worked with Holly?
I was trained by both of them. So I had a quick little moment at Parsons where I was teaching, and they offered the faculty to spend some time with both of them. And it was probably one of the best, couple of days I spent in the studio, because it changed my mind. It changed what the potential could be. And they're super just generous, Usually when it goes well, I send them a note saying, I used your methods and we just had such great results. And they're always like, that's awesome. Thank you.
Do you think in the future all clothing will be made in a zero waste patterning way? Do you think it's even possible?
I would hope so, but we're in some weird times right now. I lead with optimism. So the first answer is yes, absolutely. It's probably, it could be doable. We just would have to decide that's what we're going to do, as an industry. So, but I love the idea of an individual having agency and ownership over the design choices they make. We're also in an era right now where you as an individual can be this like local dressmaker, jacket maker, whatever it is for the people around you. It doesn't have to be global. It could be hyper local. So I love that like idea of Main Street and like, oh, there's the dress shop. Oh, everything's, on demand. That's awesome.
So for people who are incredibly excited about everything you've shared, I'm one of them. For those people, what do you recommend as next steps? Get out some paper and scissors and test it out. Maybe get the book, book.
And if you go down that rabbit hole, there are, the book, Pinterest, Instagram, you start putting in zero waste pattern making. There are people doing some really interesting things, and don't be afraid to like make a bunch of, there's a bunch of paper marquettes, to kind of play. You shouldn't be afraid of the paper, because this is definitely recyclable. And then if you do find something you love, it's very easy. Don't be afraid of the math. Just know that if you've divided by 8 to go down, you multiply by 8 to go up, and you just measure all your little lines, and then make your plan. So yeah.
Wonderful. We'll wrap up pretty soon, but if there are any questions, this is your chance. We've got Amy right here with us, and maybe even if you just want to share things that have resonated with you, that you've heard about, that you think are particularly exciting ideas, we'd love to hear that too. Meanwhile, I have a tiny question.
Yeah.
So I can't get over thinking about how you take a pre-existing garment and you take measurements, and then you like draft it on the computer so that you know what shape it is, just so you know how to cut pieces from it.
Yes.
That also, do you end up ideally with no scraps at the end, or do you end up with some scraps?
There is some scrap in that, okay. But it's not, I like to think I haven't made a demand for new textile. So there's, the thing about being sustainable is like there's no way to do it right. There's no way to do it wrong. Like just being conscious, I think, is the first step. do something, because being ambivalent or doing nothing is bad, right? So a little waste, like I save little funny little pieces of things, and then I realize I need to like stuff something, and I go and like, oh, I have all that little stuffing left over, or I made a hat I had all these gloves. I don't know, like, again, I don't stop, but it just, making that effort, I think is important. Oh, thank you, Lindsay. That's so nice.
Okay. Anything else that you want to share, Amy, before we wrap things up?
Well, feel free to reach out. I will forward that jacket pattern if anyone wants to try the single seam or two seam. I call it a butterfly coat. I'll share that. You can probably do you put content on the website for download?
Definitely can.
Yeah. Okay. So I'll give you guys that, and then just keep trying. And if you're join my fantasy and volume, there's a lot of places you can go with really big pieces of fabric. Bed sheets are fun. Quilts.
Okay, so I think we should wrap things up. So yeah, if you have further questions, Amy encourages you to email her, amy_Sperber@fitnyc.edu, which I will give you in written form later. Again, if you feel moved to donate anywhere, please do to the Fashion and Race database, which is fashionandrace.org/database. So thank you, Amy, for the wonderful pattern making demonstration. It was so inspiring. And thank you, everybody watching.
Totally.
We're so glad you're here and can't wait to hear what you do with it. Also, quick reminder, we have another awesome pattern making demo tomorrow, Sunday, July 26th, 2020 at 1 p.m. Eastern Time, called The Thrift Update, and it's going to be by Victoria Cleveland of Cleveland Designs and Tailoring. Very excited for that too.
Cool.
Keep track of us on Instagram or on the website, especially Instagram, to hear about further events down the line. Recording will be up soon, and have an amazing day. We're so glad you were able to come.
No, thank you so much. Be well, everybody.